So here's one for you. You've been interviewed several times. I figure that's a given. And if you were sitting here wearing a blue shirt, kind of unshaven like me, what would be that question that you're, oh man, I hope that the guy's going to ask me this one question that nobody asks? Is there one?
Huh. I can't think of one, Michael. You're supposed to be asking me questions.
Welcome to the Builder Straight Talk podcast with your host, Michael Krisa. Get the unfiltered truth from the trenches of construction, real estate, and funding. This episode is made possible by our sponsor, Sound Capital, funding built for builders.
Lauren, I am excited to have you on the call today. Thanks for being here.
Michael, thank you so much. I'm excited to see what we get into today.
Well, me too. I feel like we're two mischievous children and the parents have left us to play in the backyard. So let's see where this takes us. Number one, I'm really excited about what you're doing here. And I was trying to think of a really cool introduction, like when somebody's sick, they go to a doctor, the doctor makes house calls. But in this case, we're talking about a house that's sick. And then you would be the doctor that shows up to make it well. So give us the 60,000 foot view of what you're doing, and then we'll unpack that and go deeper.
Of course. Well, my name is Lauren Riddei, and I'm located in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, so right on the coast, just for context. And I am a holistic construction consultant, to sum it up. So I am a certified building biologist, which I'm so excited to get into to explain what in the world building biology is. But I help create, design, and build the healthiest structures on the planet. And so nature is our end goal. And we're going to get into this, and I'm excited. But I believe that healthy construction, focusing on the occupant, is the next frontier in construction.
So when you talk about holistic, we're talking about free range homes, grass fed, as I was teasing you at the beginning. Is that kind of?
Yep. Think about it like organic food. So we all know that there is produce that is filled with chemicals and pesticides and GMOs. And we know culturally that those aren't the healthiest options for us. So what I do in this world of construction is to help, to guide, to coach building industry professionals as well as clients on how to create built environments that are organic.
So before we get into how did you come to being this person, you're certified. And my question is, just like me in the background, I've got all these pieces of paper that I found at Walmart.
Nice.
What is the certificate? Well, what's that, sir?
They look very professional. You fooled me.
Yeah, I just printed them off. It's like I've got, those family albums here that you'll also get from Walmart with people that you don't know. So what is the certification process? Where did you get it done? And I don't want to say how legitimate is it, but I've never heard about it. So is this something that's at the forefront right now and coming online?
Yes. So you know why you probably have not heard of it is because, well, you're in Canada and I'm in North America. That's why.
The tariffs. That's why. Okay.
So building biology is the study of holistic buildings and how they impact human health. So I know you've heard of building science, right? With LEED. Okay, so building science, well, there are some similarities, but we, at the end of the day, are focused on the health of the people living inside the home. And so we look at any material that might go into the built environment, into the building envelope, from the materials, the methods, the applications, from the factory workers to the tradespeople, all the way to the end user. And so building biology, it originated in Germany. So it's well known in Europe, and we both know that Europe has much higher standards with food, with clothing, and with building. And so there was actually a group of people in the 1960s, post-World War II, that got very sick from the built environment. They were put into industrialized housing that were filled with synthetic materials and toxic chemicals. And so a cohort of people got together, including builders, designers, doctors, architects, and we're looking around, Michael, and going, what in the world is making these people sick? We've got to figure it out. And so that's where building biology originated in Germany post World War II. Have you ever heard of sick building syndrome?
Yes, I think I'm going to say, was probably latter part of the 70s, early 80s, where the focus was on making a home airtight because it was all about preserving the heat integrity of the home.
Mhm.
And what they were discovering after, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is people were getting sick, and it was the formaldehyde in the carpets, all the
That's
off
right.
gassing, because everything in there was brand frigging new. And they thought, well, great, we made this airtight bubble that people are dying in.
Yes, that's exactly right. And so in the name of energy efficiency, people's health started to suffer around that time. And so sick building syndrome became a well-known disease and disorder and sensitivities that people couldn't figure out what was going on. And so there was a group of people that decided to study this and run parallels with building science, but we are focused more so on natural materials.
So, did you actually go to Germany to train in
Oh, that's
this?
on my bucket list to do. So we actually
Oh, yeah.
have a institute in North America. There is a institute in Australia and Germany. So we are a branch off of the Germany Institute.
I'm down with going to Australia if you want. That would be fun.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah. Can you get a healthy surfboard? Is that on the?
Well, I am a surfer actually. I think yeah, they used to use wood surfboards back in the day, but that might have a little bit of a learning curve for me. So
Yeah. There you go. I'm sure you're resilient enough. So, speaking of resiliency, I think that's what actually led you down this path to begin with, because you were riddled with all kinds of ailments and, I don't want to say diseases, but your health was down the tubes. And this was part of your journey to figure out what was going on.
yes, so I got very sick in 2021, Michael, and I remember being on job site after job site, and I just had this brain fog. I couldn't remember numbers. I was making mistakes. I would be in bed for days when I would be on job sites because, as you know, we're breathing in a lot of fumes, a lot of chemicals, a lot of off gassing. But at the time, I didn't know what was going on. Well, 6 months earlier, I had a series of accidents, physical injuries. I had some chronic illness pop up. And basically, what happened, like overnight, my toxic burden became so full, it started to overflow. So we all have a burden and a tolerance to our exposure elements. Basically, being on job sites, dealing with inflammation in my body, my burden just began to overflow and I became sensitive to everything. And so I had to stop working, which was devastating because my interior design company was thriving. I had so many cool projects. I was working with so many cool trades and builders, and it was really devastating to take a step back.
Wow. When you're describing brain fog and couldn't get out of bed, like, to me, that's more like heartbreak than,
My
which is
heart was
toxic.
broken as well.
So you were doing interior design at this point.
Professionally, yes. I had been doing professional interior design, and my focus was material selections in renovations and new construction.
So how did you make the jump then? Okay, I realize you feel crap, right? But that could be attributed to a million different things. It could
Correct.
be diet, it could be, you said toxicity, but how did you make that correlation between you feeling bad, the fact that you're going into all these different homes and making that connection?
Fantastic question. I was eating healthy, Michael. I eat very clean. I move, I exercise, I do all the things, right? But this event, I would call it a catalytic event in my life. We all have those when we look back in our life and we go, wow, that was a moment that woke me up out of my slumber. I had started about a 2.5 year journey seeing doctor after doctor, specialist after specialist to figure out what in the world is going on wrong with me. No one could figure it out. And I was sitting in the office of a naturopathic doctor, and she had just run my blood work. And she noticed alarmingly high levels of lead. And she said, where are you working? What are you doing? And I said, I'm an interior designer and an antique dealer. I'm in dusty construction sites all the time. What's the problem? And she encouraged me to immediately reduce my exposure. She said, your body is not able to get over this hurdle of healing itself because of exposure after exposure after exposure after exposure. And that was a light bulb moment for me, because I never, ever, ever, ever thought, Michael, that my live, play, and work environments were impacting my health. There's no way. I actually didn't believe her. I said, there's no way. Like, this is my passion. This is my work. I can't just stop working. But that was when I realized that we pay attention to everything else, Michael, except for the built environment. Well, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, found out that we spend 90% of our time indoors. And 50% of those homes are negatively impacting people's health. I mean, that research has been around since early 2000s. So can you imagine what that stat is now?
Well, this is prompting another question, because when you say 90% is spent indoors, how much of being in your doors, let me rephrase that, because that sounds, how much time spent in your house do you think had an effect on you? Like, were there things in your house that were off gassing, or the antiques that you mentioned, or dust or pollen? Was that prevalent in your house as well?
Absolutely. And so once I had this moment of, oh my goodness, like my built environment where I currently reside, as well as my work environments, were impacting my health negatively, I need to do something about it. So I don't know if you're like this, but I went into research mode, Michael, and I went into what can I do to help my built environment become healthy, essentially. And that's when I found the Building Biology Institute. And I realized, oh my gosh, there's this huge group of people all over the world that are already doing this. And so I'm really stepping into the foot of giants that have been facing this for many, many, many decades. But I did do many things to my own home environment. I got rid of as many synthetic materials and things and possessions as possible. I switched to clay-based paints in my home, earthen finishes. I even think about my butcher block in my kitchen. Before, I would have said, yeah, cover it with some sort of sealant, right? No, 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 no. When we cover something that's natural, it can no longer do its beautiful job of hydrophobicity. It can absorb moisture and release moisture and do its job. And so raw butcher block, right? So I did maybe 50 different things in my own home, as well as reduced my exposures on my job site. So just making sure I would wear a mask if I did go on a job site and they were painting, I would avoid that. I had to be very, very careful when I was sick.
Within your own home, did you have, like you mentioned, things that you were doing? Did you have a list? Like, did you come up with this list on your own? Is this from your research? And like, how much stuff do you get rid of before you go, okay, I'm going to get rid of a few things? Like, because Michael's common mistake that I'll make, maybe it's like when I'm doing video or something like that, I'll change 3 or 4 or 5 things at once. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute, I can't really track which one thing I did that had that improvement. So when you were going on this tirade through your place, and I've got visions of the windows open and a big garage sale, like you're just throwing stuff out onto the street. Was there a methodical approach to this, that you took out a bunch of stuff and then said, okay, I'm going to give it a week or two, see how I feel? And I guess the other part of that question would be, how long did it take before you actually felt a difference?
Right. So building biology is incorporating 25 holistic principles. And so those 25 principles, I would encourage you to go look them up. They range the gamut from acoustics, from circadian friendly lighting, to electromagnetic radiation. So healthy wiring in our walls and what our Wi-Fi might be exposing us to. It ranges from natural materials to working with light frame stick construction or mass wall construction. There are 25 principles that every facet of the home, the built environment, it addresses. Now, a lot of times, these principles are more holistic in nature. So you might find half of these in the building science world, but the other half is they're a little bit more uncommon, and slowly humanity is waking up to them. But I looked at those principles and realized that I had been doing slowly over the years quite a few of them. But there were a few that I really took to heart. Like any sort of new building material I bring into my home, I'm vetting it with a safety data sheet, an SDS sheet. I'm looking into the manufacturer. I'm checking all of the ingredients because I don't, I think about paint, Michael, and I don't want to bring plastic acrylic based paint into my interior environment because whatever you bring inside your home, you become the filter for.
It's interesting you mentioned paint because I was just reading an article the other day. You remember once upon a time it was lead paint, and they stopped doing lead because they said, well, kids were eating the paint. And now they flipped it around 360 degrees and they said lead paint actually blocks in um, not UV, but electronic transmission. So now the argument is lead paint is actually good for you for the interior of the house because it's preventing this bombardment of waves that we're exposed to. It's kind of interesting how things cycle through, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, so just want to reiterate I have 3 certifications from the Institute. One of my certifications is I'm an electromagnetic radiation specialist. What does that mean? You're speaking of EMF, electromagnetic fields, that I am focused on helping people create homes that do prevent a lot of that exposure that we are bombarded with daily.
Well, the difference is I was approaching it like a 6-year-old, but you're talking about it like an adult. So yeah, let's continue with this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think about Wi-Fi, right? It's in all of our homes, and I became very sensitive to it. So I could walk into an environment, Michael, and I know some people might say that's crazy, but there are thousands and thousands of studies, peer-reviewed studies that are already out about this subject, about the harms of radiation. And so this is not new news. People just don't know about it. And so um, I would get very brain foggy and dizzy and headachy. And when I first started early on in 2020, I would turn my Wi-Fi off and I would just feel this ease. I would feel this tingly sensation that I would have just kind of fade away. And so to answer your question, I would do a test like that. I would do one thing and then see how I feel. I would do another thing and see how I feel and kind of gauge, okay, well, this is my reaction. I wonder what other people are reacting to. So we have this huge community across North America of of amazing smart individuals that are helping people in this subject of healthy homes. So there's a lot of building biologists that will do house doctor visits. They will go into people's homes and look for any sort of electromagnetic radiation exposure and reduce it. They will look for any toxicity and reduce it. So all you have to do is you can go to the building biology website and look for a specialist in your area to kind of make a house doctor call. I love how you put that.
When you show up to a job site, and obviously you've got a list and you're going through things, you're not wearing tinfoil or anything like that, are you?
Do I look like I'm wearing tinfoil today?
I can't see what you got under your jacket. And just to put this in context, I know that I can run faster scared than you can angry. So I've got that going for me. Let's pivot on this one, Lauren, and let's actually now apply this into builders that are listening in here. What are some of the common things that they should be aware of in terms of the materials that they're using, and how do they avoid using them?
Material health. I would say, especially with custom or spec or track builders, what materials are being specified in the home. So, paint, for example, it is a typically off the shelf brands are acrylic based. And so, like your comment about the lead, the acrylic based paints can do the same thing, act as kind of a sealant. It's plastic inside your interior environment. And so then you become the filter. The occupant becomes the filter of irritants, dust, mold, fungus, mildew, etc. So I would really challenge builders to look at the materials that they are specifying. Paint to flooring. Formaldehyde is a huge component in our flooring that we're still seeing today. And formaldehyde is one of those that will cause a lot of dizziness, confusion. Chronic illness is linked in formaldehyde use, and it's in almost, I don't want to say every building material, but it's in many, many modern building materials that are synthetic.
The pushback's going to be when it comes to building, it's all about the bottom line. And with the rising cost of materials,
Right.
how do you juxtapose? I want to build the healthy home. I get that because it's beneficial. It's like apparently I should be eating more broccoli and less fries, even though you've got a president that's bulletproof and eats Big Macs, right? So it's how do you wrap around value of health versus the bottom line of a builder trying to make a profit?
Great question. I know builders are in a competitive market, and buyers also in the past have been focused on square footage and aesthetics. However, there is a rising demand for health enhancing buildings. And so I would say builders, get ahead of this. Educate yourself on what is out there that can elevate your product by using healthier materials. I will say since 2020, there would have been maybe a 20% difference in more healthier, sustainable materials than your standard building materials. But since 2020, that has evened out. And so I would say there is not a huge price difference in choosing a better material.
When you talked about materials, you mentioned paint, but what else is involved? Like, is it the actual lumber that they use? Type of plaster that they're using? Like, how in depth can we go with this in terms of the variance of, let's call it, bad materials versus good materials?
Yeah, I think so. I work directly with clients. And so I think about this one client that I'm working with,
So when you say
and
clients, are you talking about the buyer or you're talking about the builder?
the buyer.
Okay.
So this one client that I'm working with, building a new home, and she has been recovering, her and her family, from mold illness. They got very sick in their home. And so my job is to help them create the healthiest home that can possibly exist. So that means that I am reviewing every single nail, every single material, every single piece of lumber that goes into that home. We are going to double check, triple check, make sure that everything that goes into that home meets health standards that are not just building code standards. And I want to get into that as well. But let's talk about lumber for a moment. I think it would be really critical for builders to have more inspections on the lumber, especially when they get delivered and then before framing. Because what I often see, Michael, is the lumber during framing is littered with mold. And so when you enclose that mold that's on the lumber in an airtight structure, you're shaking your head because you know what comes with that.
Well, I'm trying to, again, when you look at the whole building process and, here in Canada, and I'm sure it's the same in the northern parts of the US, that framing is still done in the winter. Like here, the farmers call it, you have to make hay when the sun is shining. And builders are doing the same thing. When they've got that weather envelope, they're out there doing it. So you've got this beautiful framed house and it's pouring rain and it's snowing. And then now you're sheeting over top of it. Well, yeah, you're going to entrap that moisture or encapsulate it. How the heck do you get it out? I guess the only variance would be that in the attic, if it's well ventilated, at least that's keeping it at bay. But the rest of that wood, which is now, you can almost say it's a sarcophagus once it's wrapped around with, the siding and the drywall, is that still going to be a problem? You've created a sandwich with moldy wood, theoretically. Is that going to be a problem?
Absolutely. Especially if there is some sort of water event. So when the water gets inside that wall assembly, somewhere between the sheathing to the exterior cladding to the drywall, if water gets into that assembly, yes, what you are saying is going to be a mold event from the water event, because it cannot breathe like our buildings used to be able to. And so that's why we are seeing a mold epidemic specifically with new construction, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think, so how do you resolve that? Because again, it comes down to expediency. We got to get the subdivision done. Weather is our enemy. We got to get it built. We have to keep on budget. I'm trying to get my head around what would a solution be.
I got 3 words.
Is there one? Is
Yep.
there one?
Yes, there is an abundance of solutions. But I do recognize that we are up against a systemic problem. This has been a problem that has kind of boiled and boiled and boiled and boiled. And I think we're reaching this point of explosion unless solutions are adhered to. So I've got 3 words that come to mind, and it's better building practices.
I was about to say that when a builder sees you coming, he probably has 2 words in mind, but okay. Let's go with your 3 for now.
Hey, I would just say that ultimately my goal is to educate and to help make their product better. Because if a builder is going to have an airtight home, great. But how can we make it so that we can prepare for water intrusion, that we can double check lumber? I mean, so better building practices. We build today just focused on meeting building codes, right? We see the building code and we're like, okay, we're going to meet that and we're not going to go above and beyond that. But when we look at building codes, Michael, building codes protect us from shock, from fire, from structural integrity. They basically only concern themselves, at least in the USA, I don't know about Canada, but they only concern themselves with the lethal dose. So not necessarily what is health enhancing. Okay, so my call to builders from custom to spec would be to create homes that offer healthier solutions that don't just meet building codes, but go above and beyond building codes. Because health factors like indoor air quality and electromagnetic radiation and pleasant acoustics, healthy and safe building materials, we both know those are not in the building codes, and the building codes do not care about those elements.
I think this is part of that you don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
And you've got builders that have been building, forever. I guess I want to say the good thing is, but then I interviewed a builder a couple of weeks ago, and his big thing is the 3D printed homes. And when he first pitched that to me, I just had visions of like a 3D printer. You're making what, little Lego blocks? Like, how long is that going to take? And he says, no, you fool. And then he showed me, it's one guy with an iPad and these big extrusion arms that pour like the exterior wall, the interior wall, and that can be done within 48 hours. You have a framed in house. And I thought, holy jumping, there's a solution. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking now, is that material that they're using, is that off gassing? Does it have the same kind of thing happening? So before I go down that road, let's just dispel this myth that you're not like Mary Poppins that comes flying in with an umbrella. You show up at the builder's site, you open up the bag, because I've got this vision that you're going, okay, this nail's good. No, we can't go with this one. So how do we turn this around that you actually become an advocate for the builder? And I guess the other part would be, like with anything, people are willing to pay more money for quality. Is there a certification? Is there a designation? That's probably a better word, that a builder can stamp on their home and say, we are XYZ compliant.
Right. Right. And I'm an interior designer, and I am in this field because I want to help and coach and support and empower other building industry professionals, whether that's from the architect to the builder to the tradespeople. I want a better, brighter, healthier future. And I know that it starts with the people that are crafting these building envelopes. And so I am advocating for building industry professionals to really elevate their work, but also, hey, if you don't know, you don't know. Maya Angelou has this quote where she says, do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. And that quote is so convicting to me, Michael, because I know better now. And so I don't at all mean to shame builders or designers or anyone, because like myself, I didn't know either. I didn't know that I was installing products and materials that were hazardous to human health, that were known carcinogens. I didn't know that. And so how are people going to know unless they know? Lucky for the world, I like to talk, and I and I enjoy I enjoy expressing the truth. And so I actually, there's a few builders that are certified through the Building Biology Institute as well. And their business went next level because they learned the science behind and the biology behind how to create healthier environments. So just better building practices, but there's so much education that comes along with this. And I would say once a builder knows kind of how the sausage is made, they can't unsee it, especially if they care about the end user. They're building homes for people. They care about people. They want the best for people. And so once they know that there are alternative options out there, I mean, I just can't help but think that they will find a way.
Yeah, I hate that metaphor. Once you see how the sausage is made, there's nothing wrong with chicken lips and assholes. So just put that in perspective, especially come Labor Day weekend. Let's say I'm thinking about this. The question I asked just a couple minutes ago: is there a not designation? Is there a? Well, I guess it would be. Is there a designation or certificate designation? What am I looking for? I guess designation that the builder can actually use to say I am clean home, smart home. What would you call that? Safe home compliant?
Yes, yes. So they would be able to receive a certification. It took me about a year and a half to receive all three certifications of pretty rigorous training and education from probably the smartest people in the world on these subjects of mass wall construction, of air quality, mold, and electromagnetic radiation. And so if a builder can carry these certifications, then there will be people looking for them. So I would say, and let me just dispel this myth. So you've heard of green building, right? Okay. So eco-friendly green building. Green building is great, but it's very different from building biology principles. So green building will often focus on conservation of the planet. Yes, awesome. We love that. But with that focus, the human gets left behind because they like to use recycled materials that, you mentioned it, are not
Yeah.
good for our health.
Yeah, Lauren, I would probably differentiate a green building is something that makes you feel good about yourself versus what we're talking about here makes you feel good. There's a big difference.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we can just end the interview there. I'm leaving on a high five, as Costanza would say. So let's go back. So again, I want to dispel this other myth. You're not just somebody that is on a crusade, like you were sick, you healed yourself, you found out what it was, but you're actually an intelligent person that understands the architecture and the mechanics in terms of what's involved with the whole build process. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
So when you show up, you're actually an advocate for the builder. They should be embracing you because the thing I'm looking at is you can help them distinguish themselves from other builders and it gives them a competitive advantage. And in this marketplace, it's all about what can I do to stand out from the competition. So let's go down that path. What can you do in that respect to help them differentiate themselves from Bob the builder next door?
Any risk reduction is worth aiming for. So I just want to say that. So some people might look at this and go, oh my gosh, Michael, this is a systemic problem. There's so much that needs to change. I'm overwhelmed. I'm going to stick my head in the sand. And I just want to say that any risk reduction is worth it. And so there are a variety of things that builders can do to stand out in the marketplace. I think about improving air quality. And so maybe it looks like a builder has advanced air filtration and ventilation systems with higher MERV ratings that they can communicate to their clients. Hey, we are advocates for reducing indoor pollutants and we are advocates for healthier indoor air. So, I mean, operable windows. I know that seems small, but there is a whole host of people that need cross ventilation in their home. And a lot of times our windows are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, but our indoor air quality is suffering because of it. Another element would be to avoid any red list materials that have been scientifically proven to have negative health impacts. So if a builder can say, hey, we are avoiding red list materials in our builds, you are automatically just standing above your competition. And focusing on low VOC materials, volatile organic compounds, they're chemicals that can off gas. I mean, isn't it kind of scary when someone has to put on a full hazmat suit to spray some foam inside the wall assembly and they say in 24 hours come back? I mean, isn't that a little scary to think about?
Well, I kind of had this flashback to Chernobyl when they were walking in with raincoats, thinking, yeah, this will
Exactly.
protect you. Yeah. So let me go back to that initial question. Is there a designation that the builder will get to say my homes are, what would the terminology be? Compliant? Help me out with this.
Yeah. So, okay, you've heard of LEED. So if a builder wants a compliant home based on a set of standards, LEED would be a good option for them to go. Now, building biology is formed from principles because everyone's different. We learned this during COVID. Everyone is different. Everyone is unique. Everyone has unique circumstances. And so it's really difficult to place a dynamic, ever changing human within a fit standard. And so that is why building biology has chosen not to set a list of standards because we are too dynamic. What is good for one person isn't necessarily going to be good for another person. I think about wool versus something that like latex. Someone might be allergic to latex, or someone might be allergic to wool. So to set a standard and say, a building biology approved house only uses wool, well, I think that is doing a huge disservice to individual clients. And so I would say if a builder carried the certification of the new build consultant, the environmental consultant, and then the electromagnetic radiation specialist, I would be like, yep, they get it. They know it. They get it. They are advocates for the end user.
I'm trying to say this in a nice way, so don't take it wrong. You strike me as the kind of person that's really energetic, passionate about what they do, and like save the whales, even though you're in the middle of the desert. When you first started with this and approach builders, and I take it this is what you've done, approach builders, how were you received at first? And is there a story that you can share with us that in retrospect, if you were to do it again, you would have done it differently?
It's a great question. So I would say it's probably split down the middle of tradespeople in the field that they don't want to change. They have been doing it a certain way and they're not interested. And then there are another set of builders and designers and architects that are realizing that with every industry comes change. And they realize that if they don't change, the change is going to change them, or it could be forced upon them. And so I find the most encouragement from building industry professionals that say, my entire view of life has changed because I realize that everything is connected back to the built environment since we spend so much time there. But once I realized that I was in this industry creating homes just for the end purpose of the dollar, I mean, to me, that's a little purposeless. And to have people realize that they're building homes for families to thrive and to celebrate and to connect, I'm finding that those builders are actually the ones that are waking up to this sooner because their purpose is kind of allotted in the right area. And they're wanting to change. They're wanting to adapt. They're wanting to improve some of the ways that they didn't realize were issues before. We
You
don't
know,
know
uh,
until we know.
that's a really interesting differentiation because there are builders that obviously are doing it for profit. And I don't want to say it's because they couldn't do anything else, but they fell into that trade because maybe their father, grandfather, whatever it is. And I'm doing this because, instead of a rattle, they put a hammer in my hand. So it's the only thing they know.
And nothing
And
wrong with it, by the way.
yeah, no, not at all. And I've met other builders that they're really passionate about it. And for them, the big thing when they build something, it's a legacy. And when they're driving, and as kind of hallmark as this may sound, they're driving down the street with their kids, and they can say, "Hey, you see that building there on the first floor? Well, your dad used to work in that cubicle punching buttons." Yeah, okay, well, that's got a real impact. Versus driving down a subdivision and say, "I built that." And that's going to be there long after he's gone, and their kids and their kids, sort of thing. And that gives them a great sense of pride.
Yes.
And one of the things during some of the interviews that I've had, I've explained to the builders that you guys are superheroes and you don't realize it,
Right.
because you're not just building, sticks and it's a roof over somebody's head. But when you look at the amount of people that you impact because your tender little footsies walk this earth, like think of the trades that you employ, all the suppliers that you are paying that can now pay their families. Now they have money, they can buy houses. So that's on the back end of that mirror. And when you look at from the consumer side, you're putting a roof over somebody's head, yes, but you're also building generational wealth. Because I don't know about you, but if I try to put aside 30,000 a year, that ain't going to happen. But if I have a $300,000 home and it appreciates 10% a year, that's 30 grand a year that it's going up every year. And at one day when I decide to cash out, retire, or my kids are going to get it, not that I have any that I'm aware of, but if they were, that's money that I was able to accumulate because I was paying my mortgage, but everything had to do with that one builder that decided to pick up a hammer and drive a nail. So,
Builders are some of the bravest
yeah.
people I know.
So I think to your point, I think the ones that realize I'm building something of high quality, my name is on this. And I had a friend that was a painter, and he learned under his dad. And his dad would say, "Can you put your name on that?" And if you can't, then you go back there and do it again. I would think the same mindset would be prevalent here, that a builder, can I put my name on this? And have I done everything I possibly can to build a quality home that's going to be safe, as we talked about structurally, but then also from a holistic health perspective?
That's right.
So then your job is to get that message out there and communicate it. Again, save the whales in the desert. We have to wake up more builders to what's going on, that this is actually a thing.
Yep. And new construction has a life expectancy. New construction has a life expectancy of 40 years. So planned obsolescence is a very real thing. And so I know for me is when I think about my own integrity, I want to build and design homes that will carry on a legacy for generations, because that is our history. As building industry professionals, that is where we come from. We come from using natural materials. I mean, I know hardwood has been replaced with OSB, and I know plaster has been replaced with drywall, but we come from this inspiring place of creating structures that heal people and that help people. And we kind of have gotten astray, to put it lightly. And so really, I want to encourage people, let's get back on this track of our history of creating built environments that are natural, that are safe, that are health enhancing. And I know it's systemic, and I know that it can be scary to change habits, but I actually think about this quote from a chemist. His name is Max Kopenhopper. No, I have his name here. Max Pettenkofer. He was one of the pioneers of the early indoor air quality movement. And he said, if a space contains a pile of manure, one should not try to remove the odor by ventilation, but rather remove the manure.
This makes me think of Victorian England, where instead of taking baths, because that was considered uncool, they wore these little, I don't know if you've noticed, little perfume bags. And so what that did is it gave off a scent, if you will, to mask the fact that they stunk. And these things just got bigger and bigger, and they applied more and more of them. So it's kind of funny, masking the scent versus addressing the problem. It's interesting. I think one of the things that I've discovered from doing these interviews, and especially in the industry, is, and it's an alarming fact, that for every 5 builders that are retiring, because we're getting to that point now, that only 1.5 are coming into the industry. And there is going to be a tsunami, if you will, the perfect storm where you have not enough builders, not enough coming in, but the demand, like I think the US number is 1 million homes per year for the next 30 years,
Wow.
will just bring you to where we need to be. Right? I'm wondering if part of what your message is, you have to instill that with the young builders that are starting. So does it start in the community colleges and the trade schools as something that they have to understand, almost like an elective? You know, when a doctor, and this is truly sad, when a doctor goes to medical school, the whole idea of nutrition is basically a half day course versus the encyclopedia of pharmaceuticals that they're taught to use instead. I'm wondering if this is where we have to start in the actual trades right at the beginning when they're learning the craft, and so they can understand what the difference is so they can take that message forward. Would that make sense?
Absolutely. I didn't learn an ounce of this information in design school. Not an ounce of this information. And
Well, if you had
so,
never got sick, you would have never known about this. You'd been
right.
eating Big Macs and finger dabbing and paint, and life would have been sweet.
Breathing in toxic fumes and, yeah.
It's me that cigar.
Yeah, so I believe that it will start with education. And I mean, if you are in the building industry professional, I can recommend you pursue at least one certification from the BBI Institute in North America, because you will be surrounded by other tradespeople in this industry that are at the top of their game. They are providing and producing some of the most impeccable, beautiful, sustainable, and they don't have to be outrageously expensive either. There are so many builders that are using natural materials like hempcrete, rammed earth, adobe, clay that are a fraction of the cost of modern light frame construction materials. So it just to be in that community surrounded by like-minded people that are wanting to literally change this industry for the betterment is inspiring in and of itself. So yes, I would encourage anyone listening, up your game, educate yourself, whether it's the Building Biology Institute or another certification program. Educate, 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 because the consumer is going to be educating you if you don't educate yourself. They are rising with more demand for transparency, and consumers are wanting healthier materials. Consumers are waking up to mold in their homes and they're having to move. And so, just to prevent the headache of a building failure, there are so many strategies that a builder can implement just to even reduce mold. And so if they are seeing the future, they can see where we're heading. And so I just want to encourage builders that there are so many solutions available, and any reduction is worth the effort. I promise.
There's this evil dark side of my brain that I try to leave behind me when I go out in public. But there's certain words that you say that I don't trigger me. I hate that expression. Now I got to go to a safe place and hold on to a teddy bear and cry. Um, when you say natural materials, I just had this flash of builders foraging through the forest, collecting sticks that they're going to use. And now instead of work boots, they're wearing sandals and they're using wooden mallets. But that's not where we're going here. And you can slap me if we ever meet in person. Let me ask you this. At the beginning, about a quarter of the way through, you mentioned a list of, I think it was 25 things.
25 principles.
Is that a list that you can share? And by all means, like, water stamp it so they know it's you, put your picture on the corner. Is that something we can put together and share with builders?
You can Google it right now. Building Biology 25 Principles. And these are principles that are used around the world. And so you can look where our focus is. And like I said, it ranges from in-home water filtration to air quality to making sure your site is graded and well sloped for water drainage. It's making sure that there's no pesticide use with landscape. I mean, there are consumers that are wanting that. And so it is automatically assumed with North American light frame construction that it is not good for our health. It's just assumed.
Is there, so we've talked about the idea that these techniques and materials that we're going to use are going to make you feel not you'll be well versus versus feeling good about yourself. You're going to feel good. Okay. That's, I'll get that on a t-shirt. I'll send it to you. I feel good about myself. How does this meld with building code? Is there a crossover, and is there anything in the code, or is the building code somehow, how do I say, adjusting? Is it coming up to speed with the things that you've discovered?
Like I said, building code is just trying to prevent structural integrity, failures, shock, and fire. And so my hope would be that there will be an increase beyond the basics, because that's pretty basic. I would love to see possible codes with material health, and what materials are going into the home. Do they meet expectations? Are they health enhancing, or are they soaked in formaldehyde, right? And so, but at the end of the day, Michael, we can't rely on any governmental agency or standard to fix the problem. I am of the essence that no one else is going to do it. And so I'm going to own my part, and I'm going to take ownership of what I can do. And so a lot of times, if there is a builder who is needing help from a building biologist, or a client has searched out a building biology consultant to help them make their home as healthy as possible, they are always going above code, because code does not fret about these things that are actually dangerous and hazardous to human health. And it's really just going above and beyond, and it starts in the design phase. So a lot of times when you're out on the job site, and the client really wanted mineral wool for insulation, and they all of a sudden see spray foam insulation going in, well, they can't just say, oh, I need to tell the builder to cancel the spray foam, because there's a different R value. And so part of the wall assembly needs to be planned in the design phase to meet that specific R value. So that's why I always say, start at the beginning with a healthy home consultant to plan it, to prep for it. And so there are no surprises for anyone on the building team, because we're all in this together. And so we don't want anyone to be caught off guard, because we know that's a headache, order changes. And so I have found that there are some builders that are like, wow, like my work now is next level. Like my work now is, I feel like I could have clients for days, because the majority of people are not doing this.
How do you keep yourself motivated? Because, like any, I don't want to say apostle, I don't want to say zealot, but anyone that's willing to step outside of the herd, right, and get your voice out there. And what do you do to stay focused, motivated, as opposed to, there must be days where you feel like getting an environmentally friendly piece of wood and just whacking yourself in the head because they just don't get it. What do you do to stay positive and keep charging through?
Okay, well, two things. I was homeschooled, and so I was taught to be a critical thinker. Like I was
Okay.
literally trained to think critically and to ask questions. So my entire life, Michael, I've asked questions about the system. What about this? Is this right? So I've just naturally been a question asker. The second part of your question is, I don't worry or fret about people that don't worry or fret about this. I want to work with people that get it, that are excited about it, that understand it. And so then I can sleep peacefully and sound and not have to worry about a thing, because I am surrounded by so many people that are in this vision. They get it, they understand it, they are professional, they are wise beyond their years. And I am noticing that it is starting with some of the younger builders for sure, who are wanting to up level their game. But Michael, I don't worry about anyone that doesn't want to get it, because at the end of the day, if someone had approached me 8 years ago and said, hey, if you're just focused on what people see, like the tile and the paint and the lighting, have you ever thought that might not really fully 100% matter, that maybe the wall assembly might matter a little bit more? I would have pushed back, and I would have said, no, I don't think so. But I had to have a personal experience to physically get sick to wake up to a new reality. And I am wanting to create a place for future generations. And that is my commitment. That is my goal. I hope to inspire people, but also it's not it does I don't need a lot of motivation because I love this. I love this industry. I love what we get to do. And I've always been maybe a little weird. So it's like I'm always doing things that maybe people catch up later to. So I tend to have a trend in my life where I'm ahead of the curve, and sometimes you have to deal with the consequences of being the canary in the coal mine.
Interesting. Let's do a quick lane change here. Favorite book?
Well, my favorite book that I think your audience would really like is Prescriptions for a Healthy Home by one of my professors and my mentors, Paula Baker Laporte. She is a pretty famous architect in the world of natural mass construction. Prescriptions for a Healthy Home is a great starting place for builders if they want to start going down this rabbit hole.
Interesting. What about a favorite movie? Nothing to do with home building.
Hmm. You're going to laugh at this. Oh, brother, where art thou?
Oh my gosh, I just watched it the other day.
Did you? What's your favorite scene?
There's so many, I don't even know where to start. I think when Dan Goodman, they're having their big picnic and he breaks off the branch, and then it's kind of like that come to Jesus moment. I'm a banjo and guitar player, so Kaminsky, the guy that's actually singing the stuff, just so many good points in there. Wow, that's a good movie. So here's one for you. You've been interviewed several times. I figure that's a given. And if you were sitting here wearing a blue shirt, kind of unshaven like me, what would be that question that you're, oh man, I hope that the guy's going to ask me this one question that nobody asks? Is there one?
Huh. Hmm. I can't think of one, Michael. You're supposed to be asking me questions. Can I ask you
I
a
just
question?
did.
Can
What's
I
the
ask you a
question?
question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, why are there so many builders named Michael?
Well, because Michael was the archangel who was sent down on earth to fight off the devil and the dragon. So maybe it's because if they're creating a sanctuary for families to live, it's part of their archetype and spirit to be that protector and part of that last breed of men that are willing to stand up. How's that?
Beautiful. I
I thought you
know
were gonna.
I know 5 Michael builders just in my little zip code.
Well, so you won't answer the question about what it is that you've never been asked. I guess we've kind of reached that point. Anything that I've missed that you'd like to cover?
No, I would just leave a closing thought that it has been said that builders, architects, and designers impact our health more than our doctors. It has been said. And so I would just encourage folks, think about your individual responsibility. And I know for me, I've sensed my responsibility and I'm committed to it. And I just hope to, even if it's a little wedge of a thought, Michael, an aha moment or a different way of thinking, just so that builders don't have to be so overwhelmed, but there are just quite a few solutions to increase their game in the building world. So I'm just so excited to have had this conversation with you, and I really appreciate your great questions.
Yeah, you just said something earlier about being a critical thinker, and we've got a generation of kids that have been indoctrinated. And I think of the phrase that they've been mercifully spared from the responsibility of an original thought. And we're asking builders now to step up and critically think about what's going. Because I think a bad builder makes good business for a doctor. You just made that connection there. And again, the evil side kicked in there. Yeah, bad builder, good business for a doctor. So, last question, where can they find out more about you and what you do?
Yep. So you can check out my work at householistics.com. House is Haus. It originated in Germany. So I'm giving my German honor because in Germany, house is any structure. It could be an apartment to a single family home to a dorm room. And so I thought that was kind of a fun play on words. I'm also on Instagram I have my own podcast as well, where I'm interviewing the top leading experts in the entire world on this subject. So please go there to educate yourself. I also have an amazing resource page on my website where I am showing different organizations around the world that are talking about this, as well as studies, stats, and figures. I'm a Virgo, so I like to double check, triple check all my numbers to make sure. And so you can also go check out the Building Biology Institute if a builder is interested in learning and growing in their understanding of the built environment.
Lauren, my new healthy friend, thanks for taking time out today. I had a lot of fun.
I had a lot of fun too. When are we going to do part 2?
I don't know. We'll have to, well, once you come up with the answer to that question, which is what is the question that you've never been asked that you want to be at, that would be a perfect segue for part 2, the movie.
I think so. And we should start the podcast off with that question.
Thanks for listening to Builder Straight Talk. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. Until next time, keep building smarter. This episode is made possible by our sponsor, Sound Capital, funding built for builders.